This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.
Well, hello, everybody. Hang on one second. I got to change the background out just a little bit. There we go. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming on in. It's, of course, bigfootmichiganrob. Glad to see everybody rolling on in the chat today. Time once again for some cryptid encounters, right, that I've gotten from folks, right? You guys seem to like this. It's kind of a new installment, what I've been doing. I've been doing it in video form for a while. And then it seems like more and more people like when I do it live. So I've been doing that. This is about my 5th or 6th installment. So thanks for everybody for coming in. And I've got 3 for you today. I titled this The Werewolves of Alabama, right? As I wait for people to roll in, I'm going to start off, though, with a creepy paranormal. I think it's paranormal encounter that this family came across. And I will tell you guys, listen, it's kind of sad. It's kind of, it's maybe a little bit tragic even. I don't know, depending on your point of view. I think it is. But so, yeah, we're going to get this show rolling here in a minute. And I want to thank each and every single one of you for coming on. And, a lot of these encounters I do, I most of them I memorize and tell the story. And I have cliff notes because I think it's important. I have to say that at the outset that when somebody sends something to me via email or a DM or a long text, they take the courage to send these in. So I do my due diligence to make sure I don't miss any of their details. So that's kind of how I do these, and a lot of these you can find in my books too. Some you haven't heard, some for the very first time, some I haven't made public until maybe today or tomorrow or whenever. But as I did mention really briefly early on, some do come from the books, and I got 2 out there, as you all know. On Amazon, Bigfoot Michigan Rob presents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1 and Book 2. They're both found on Amazon. So, yeah, go check that out. If you've bought the books, please do me a favor and leave a review. Everything's analytics these days. Just like on YouTube, if you leave an Amazon review and you bought the book, then it helps promote the sales with Amazon. Also, much like the YouTube, you leave a comment after the show, you hit the thumbs up button, that helps the analytics. So everything is analytics. So in advance, I do appreciate that from each and every single one of you. We got that conference going on. I'm gonna breeze through that really quick. Most of you, have what's going on here with the Crossing Realms Conference, September 19th and 20th, taking place in Richmond, Missouri. Really briefly, our headliners that are speaking are Josh Hurd, William Lunsford, Lady Ann Celine, Ronald Murphy, Sir Brian Bowden, Dean Bertram, Frankie and Dan from the Haunted Garage will be there, bringing a haunted car. Miguel from Sasquatch Theory. Other special guests that will be there as well: Ken Gerhard, Dana Stricker, Brent Thomas, Ryan Edwards, Christopher Garantano, Linda Eastburn, and David Glidden. And it's hosted by the whole crew: Tex, BMR, Brandy and Krista, Monica, Paranormal Paul, Danielle Diva, Randy Gilbert, our tech guy, Donnie Cho, and I think the other one is Jason. Yes, of course, Jason McLean, who does all the artwork. So, yeah, come on down. The ghost hunt that we're having as well on that Saturday is already sold out. Yeah, it's sold out. So get your tickets today. I know it's in September 19th and 20th, but even the rooms around Missouri are starting to fill up. This is going to be one heck of a great event, I think. So I'm really excited about that. It's about 8 months away. So again, of course, if you're new here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, the Blondes and the Boots, Texas Front Porch, Monica, Donnie, Paranormal Paul, the rest of us, and the super chat's open. Of course, a great way to support the show if you care to do so. Not expected, always appreciated. You can also become a BMR pirate, mateys. Arr. Join today. Join the many. Join the few. Just depends on your point of view. Thank you in advance for that. I'll do a quick roll call here before I get started with the awesome show I got planned for you guys. Gary Spike Sr., Lil Patty, Mickey G. Hey, Mickey, what's going on? Scrolling down, Keith was on last Tuesday. If you didn't see that live show, me and Krista with Keith from Michigan. Fantastic show. One of the highest rated shows I've had in recent weeks. Check that on out. Keith's a great guy. He'll be back for future shows as well because he's got a whole bunch more to talk about. We've also got who else do we have? Sober Carper's in the chat room. Blah, blah. Scrolling down, Ace. Hi, Ace. Hi, Larry. Larry Berlin. Hi. If you're new, please subscribe, everybody. Lisa Sinfully Wicked. You changed that up a little bit, Lisa, I noticed. Mr. G Rides. How you doing? Great. Thanks for coming in. I think I said Little Patty. Hi again. Blah, blah, blah. Scrolling down. A lot of the same folks. There's like already 42 in here. Southern Belle Bigfoot. Hi, Southern Belle. How you doing? Barbara. Hi, Barbara Moore. Good to see you once again. Appreciate it. Scrolling down. Mark Beastel. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for coming in. Andy the trucker. Thanks for coming on in today. Appreciate all you guys. Scrolling down a little bit further. If I don't miss you, it's just as I'm blowing through this quickly. Mark, Gary. Okay, looks like we're getting to kind of Sissy lost a Sissy. Now I know you. It's been a while. Thanks for coming on in, Sissy. Val from Pennsylvania. Henry's here. Who else is here? Debbie is here. Hi, Debbie. How you doing? Scrolling down. Blah, blah, blah. I guess that's the end of it for now. But thanks for everybody for coming in. Thanks for everybody for coming on in. So with that being done, took care of the business. Thanks for the books. Like this, like it, hit the like button. It does help me. Subscribe, leave a review for the books. And so anyway, as I said, I'm getting on with this. I got 3 stories for you. Cryptid encounter stories I've gotten from folks across the United States for the most part. And the last 2 are going to be about werewolves and Dogman in Alabama. But to warm everybody up, I'm going to start off with well, you guys, I'm not going to say what this is. I'll leave a comment afterwards for all of these and let me know what your thoughts. I love when you guys leave comments because I do my best to read them all and respond back to you. I try that. I'm not that big yet, so I can afford to do that, right? So take advantage of that. Leave a comment, and I will get back with you as soon as I can. So we're going to move on. We're going to get this party started here. And I got this from I believe the guy's name was Joshua. Joshua. His mom and his dad are involved in this. Their names are Jan and Leonard. Okay. So this is a creepy story. And give me your take a little later after the show. So hey, a bounty hunting bear. Thanks for coming on in. Standing Stones, thanks for coming in. Again, Yvette Filgo, hello. So anyways, when I start these stories, I really don't follow the chat too much, as a lot of you pointed out to me, but you were nice about it. So anyways, this guy, Joshua, goes on to tell me he's about 13 years old. And he was going on and telling me about, it was supposed to be, remember the Y2K, everybody? When, the computers are all going to be shut down. It was supposed to be like maybe not the end of the world as a lot of people proclaimed, but it was about everybody was storing water, dried goods, canned goods. Some people were going out of the way and building shelters, down in their basements or an outdoor dwelling. So this took place Y2K 2000. this young man goes, Josh, well, I don't know how young he is, but he goes on to tell me that he and his parents live on roughly a half acre of land in Stanley, Idaho. He goes on to tell me that the where they live was nestled at the bottom of the Sawtooth Mountains. Population in this little village or town was under 100 people. So very, very small, very quaint, nestled away in the mountains. He actually goes on to say, hey, Rob, the town of Stanley can be very easily missed as people just don't realize during this village or this town, but it's very beautiful, beautiful surroundings with the mountains. And he's also nestled close to the Sawtooth National Recreation Area, where a lot of people go hunt, camp, everything. There's abundance to do, a lot of wildlife. People hunt there, they fish there. And so early on in Joshua's life, his father had taught him how to fish and even how to hunt. Even though he was a younger age, this guy was very experienced with the rifle, the shotgun, so on and so forth. His father's name is Leonard, and he was going on to tell me that his father had a very modest but successful business locally in town, and that's how he made a living. And then he goes on to say, he proceeded to say that his dad, they always went camping, and his dad would always sit around or in the backyard or while they were out fishing or even in the yard. He would always tell stories about Bigfoot and Dogman. Okay, I got to move something really quick. It's bugging me here. Sorry about that, you guys. I got to do something here if I can. I don't know if that I can or not. Well, I can't. No big deal. So, anyways, going back to the story, he would talk about Bigfoot and Dogman. He even talked about goblins, ghosts, and ghouls. Talked about aliens. He talked about how all of these phenomena laid at the foothills of the Sawtooth Mountains. Joshua goes on to tell me that his dad even got so dramatic about his tales that the mother, Jan, would get really upset, forewarning the father he's going to have nightmares. He's going to grow up thinking we live in a really part of town and not be able to go to sleep at night. I guess he's telling me the dad would smile at the wife and just say, well, I like telling a good yarn. He goes on to tell his son that part of the stories that he did tell them were part factual, truthful, and some were fables, maybe a little bit of fiction. But he always told his son to be aware of the surroundings. And of course, the mom would always roll her eyes back and say, okay, whatever, he's your son. He's got to grow up soon, I suppose. Roger, Wendy, Standing Stones, how you doing? So young Joshua, though, went on to say that his dad's stories really never did frighten him. He did find them to be amusing and entertaining. However, he always said the one thing that he was always scared of was that his dad told him to play very close to the house and not to wander too far off from the house. In fact, the father also warned his son never to play down by the well. So there's this well on this property. He told his son, Joshua, to never look down into it. He goes on to tell me that the well laid perhaps 50 yards or so from the back of the house. The dad never gave a reason as to why he told his son not to go to the well, just not to go. He also told his son when he got old enough to always be, thank you, Kelly. He also told his father to be very vigilant when he would get older in life and go out into the woods. Again, the father never gave him a reason, just told him, be vigilant. Don't go by the well. So his son became very scared of the well. I mean, the dad told him about stories about Dogman and Bigfoot and aliens and all these other paranormal phenomena, which he wasn't scared of. But what he was scared of, you guys, was the well. So he did just as his dad said, never went to the well. But then as Joshua got older, he says right around the age 13, he started to become very much intrigued about the well. In fact, young Joshua was also starting to plan visits to the well whenever his dad was off at work and when the mother was out cutting hair. What was on his mind? What was the big thing? What was the big ordeal about this well? So that kind of, over the last several years, was starting to play on his mind, right? And he even goes on to tell me, hey, Rob, I don't understand why my dad was so frightened about this well. He needed to know and he wanted answers, especially as he's getting older. In fact, this young guy, Joshua, says, when I turn 16 years old, that's when I'm going to go and look into the well, by the well. He wants to know. So the closer and closer that his 16th birthday came, the more feverish he began. He started making up in his mind, what's this well about? But he was a very good kid. He listened to his dad. He did not go to the well. So this kid in his mind formulates, when I turn 16, I'm getting pretty old. I'm going to check it out. The morning of his 16th birthday, it was finally arrived. The parents, the mom and dad of Joshua, planned on having a special party for him. They invited all the family and friends. That morning, the dad was off to work, and the mom was off to cut hair in town a couple miles up the road. And the parents were very secure with letting him stay at home right around the age of 13 or 14. And he also mentioned that, like he stated earlier, that the town was like a ghost town. Not a, the only people that he's seen publicly was when he went in town, or the mailman or the newspaper boy, right? Back when we had newspapers delivered. So, kid turns 16 that morning. Mom and dad off to work. He's by himself. He says, Rob, that's when my adventure starts. He says, Rob, it's about 10 o'clock in the morning, and went off to this supposedly, allegedly dangerous well. He starts his trek toward the well. Now, the well is about 50 yards from the back of the home. He goes on to tell me, hey, Rob, the closer I got to this well, the colder my skin grew. The colder his skin grew. Young Joshua says it's probably just his imagination. Then, all of a sudden, his nostrils filled with this pungent, foul smell as he approaches maybe 20 feet away from this well. He kind of dismissed the smell, the pungent smell. And he finally arrived at the edge of the well. He reaches the well. He places both hands on top of the stone-laid brick and looked down inside the well. The earlier pungent smell that he was, the aroma when he was like 20 feet away, it kind of dissipated and went away. But then as he got to this well, when he looks inside of this well, a different aroma came back, and it was a pungent smell. He says, "Hey Rob, man, it was more like rotting flesh and kind of like sulfur." Okay. Hi, Christy. Hello to everybody. If I missed you, he said the sulfur smell burned his nostrils. It burnt his eyes, his nostrils. He goes on to say, Rob, now I'm kind of getting a notion as to why my dad didn't want me over here, because all of a sudden he looks deep into this cavern of the well, and he says, Rob, he heard it was a whisper of a voice, but it was very clear. It was loud, just loud enough for him to hear. And this voice speaks out from the bottom of this well. He says that despite it being a low volume, the voice was very deep. It was very gravelly. And he's thinking is wicked, very wicked to be sure, right? And then the voice says to this kid, Joshua, and I quote, "Why do you disobey your father? He now must be punished." So let's back up a minute. Excuse me. The dad tells his son, for all these years, for whatever the reason, don't go to the well ever. Don't look into the well. Don't go near the well. Throughout these years, this kid is getting full of anxiety. As he gets older, he's now inquisitive, right? He wants to know what's up with this well. So now, the very first time that he goes to the well, again, the words uttered from the bottom of this well, "Why do you disobey your father? He now must be punished." Joshua says, "Hey, Rob, man, I was terrified. I was in shock." And now he is questioning why he even disobeyed his dad. He turns around after these words are uttered, and he runs directly, he takes a beeline, everybody, straight to his house. He gets inside his house. He locked the door to his bedroom. He crawls under his bed and brings a blanket. So this kid's 16, you guys, just turned 16. He's so scared that he goes, hides, he locks his bedroom door, gets a blanket, goes under the bed. And this is right around 10 o'clock in the morning. Again, the mom and dad are off at work, and they're planning a party for him that afternoon. So he goes on to tell me, yeah, Rob, it was about 12 o'clock noon. The mom got home. And again, Josh was still under his bed, locked in a room. She knocks on the door, and she yells like most moms. You've all heard the phrase, "Wake up, sleepyhead." You know, we've all heard that, especially when we're all teenagers living at home. And so he got up. You know, he kind of dismissed, and he was not going to tell anybody about what he did, that he went against dad, right? He got up, and already when he got up, there was a bunch of people down in the basement or in the area of the house where they all wished him happy birthday. A bunch of friends were over, an aunt, some uncles, and they had a little birthday party for him. So this went on for a little while. Excuse me, guys. So this went on for a little while, and everyone left the house. It was a cool birthday party. Happy 16th, sweet 16th birthday. The night grew close, and Joshua goes off to sleep. He goes on to say, "Hey, Rob, during the nighttime, this young Joshua, 16-year-old Joshua, he says he tosses, he turns. He had all these nightmares now. The same day, later in the day, that he went down and looked into the well, right? He has these dreams, all sorts of monsters, weird images, and even dares to say there was images of you can't really say this on YouTube, images of death." The words that were spoken to him from the bottom of that well earlier kind of rang through his head. They were repeated over and over in his head. Young 16-year-old Joshua now wakes up. He's crying. He runs off to his mom and dad's bedroom. And actually, he was embarrassed. It's his birthday. He's crying like a little baby and just want to be with his mom and dad. The mom and dad, of course, asked their son, what's wrong? Something happened at the party? Why are you all crying, broken down like this? Then young Joshua tells the parents about his nightmares. Then, reluctantly, because he knew what his dad had told him, so he was kind of, pussyfooting around this, finally tells his father about his visit to the well where he was not allowed to go down to. He tells him about the visits. He tells him about the putrid smell of rotting flesh. Tells him about the smell of sulfur. And he also told his parents, which he did not think they would believe him at all, was about that voice from the bottom of the well that spoke out to him. He says, Rob, my dad's face turned crimson red. He could tell his dad was fit to be tied. But the father, his name is Leonard, he restrained himself. The father, Leonard, looks at the mother, Jan, and they glance back at their son. They told their son to sit tight, that they had to excuse themselves, and they had to sit down and chat together without their son being present. They went back and told their son, Dad's not mad at you. The dad said, I'm not mad at you. We'll talk more. We'll talk in the morning or whatever. So excuse me. So that next morning, the dad was off to work, didn't talk to his son, but he goes off to work. And the mom stayed home to still comfort her son and talk about the nightmares. And then she asked her son what she was doing at the well. And Joshua went on and told his mom, I was just curious. Dad told me all these stories about how not to go to the well. Years went by, and he goes, frankly, Mom, the more Dad told me about this well, the more intrigued and fascinated I became as I got older. And he even tells his mom, look, when I was like 13 or 14, Ma, I planned on coming in this well when I was right around 16 on my 16th birthday. He goes, yes, I was planning on going behind your back. Well, she said, well, son, I understand. And then she says, hey, you know what? Your father's going to be home pretty soon, and we'll just all sit down and have a family talk about the well. Hey, cool hand. Hi, boss. So now here's where the story even gets even a little more weirder. Not that it's already weird. It was an hour or so past when the father, Leonard, arrives home from work. So he was already 1 hour late. So the mom, a little bit nervous, or maybe not nervous, but a little worried or concerned, called her husband, Leonard's work, and also set in a page. This, you got to remember too, they used the pager still in 2000, so the pager was still a thing we all used, if you guys remember. So set up some pages to the dad, try to call the work, this, that, and the other. Well, Leonard, the father, he doesn't call back. They don't hear from him. Then the mother, Jan, starts getting a little more worried, so she started calling Leonard's friends and other family members to see if they heard from him. She gets a hold of the boss at work, right? And she's extremely worried. Now, the entire night goes by. Now, the entire day goes by, you guys. No word. The mom calls the police. Missing person on my son, my husband. Finally, the boss from Leonard's work, I think his name is Tony. Tony finally, the next morning, almost a day later, finally calls Jan and told Jan that Leonard never came in to work the prior day. Of course, now the mother is really upset, really worried. She's frantic. Of course, the son Joshua also is frantic. The mom back on the phone calling all the friends, the neighbors, anybody she can think of if they've seen her husband, if they've seen this Leonard. And then young Joshua starts having all these thoughts. He starts thinking that perhaps him disobeying his father and going to the well, which his dad continually told him not to do, he's thinking maybe he was at fault. And then he remembers the creepy voice that emanated from the bottom of the well that said, "Why do you disobey your father?" He, meaning the father, you guys, he must be punished. Hi, obese tuna. You guys, yeah, I can imagine this young guy is going through something. He thinks he did this. His dad's telling him not to go there. Here's those words. Now his dad, all of a sudden, 24 hours later, is missing. Didn't go to work. Didn't report to work. Young Joshua runs off back to the well. Goes back to the well. Rob, I don't know why I ran back to the well, but I'm thinking that I had something to do with this. I'm thinking the well had something to do with this. And he was just trying to do the best he can to find his father. So he thought he could seek answers at the well. In fact, he thought that perhaps he could communicate to the voice from the pit of the well. Much like last time, he gets closer and closer to this well. His skin, once again, like the last time, his skin grew cold. Nostrils filled with the pungent odor of sulfur. Gets to the edge of the well, everybody. Like last time, puts both of his hands on top of the well, on the top of the brick of the well. And for the second time, he looks down into the well. Rob, he's telling me, upon looking into the well, horror afflicted me. I yelled, I screamed, I cried. Rob, he goes on to say, there, laying at the bottom of the well, was his father. Can you imagine? This kid now thinks he was the cause for the demise of his father. Dad told him not to go. The son was told at the well by that voice, your father must be punished. Father turns up missing. He's at the bottom of the well. I can't go on any further, Rob. This is where my story ends because I suffer greatly mentally now. I seek answers. He says a final note, though, before I end the email to you, Rob. In case you're wondering, he goes on to tell me, because the dad, Leonard, when he went to work well, he did not go to work, but when he took off in the morning, he took his vehicle. He said to this day, the car has never turned up, never been found. He gave me this story, this encounter, this experience took place in 2000, the year 2000, as I said earlier. And he emailed me this story, like I think in 2022. So from 2000 to current day 2025, this young man, older guy now, he has no answers. He's got mental issues and he blames himself for the death. You guys, that's crazy. I cannot imagine that. I can't imagine. I appreciate he sent that to me. I don't know that I would send that to anybody. That's why I do these stories for these folks, and because they don't want to come on shows, they just want to air out. I guess, like I tell people, it's kind of like therapy. And this dude, he needs some therapy. I'm not going to say he did this, but he blames himself. I don't know. What do you guys think? Leave a comment. I can't really read the chat and get into a chat with you guys because I got 2 more stories to do. But after the show, leave a comment. Give me your thoughts on this one. As you know, I watched my mom. I got help her with her medication. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Then I got 2 more werewolf tales for you guys. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. I'll give me about 2 seconds because I got to take care of quick business. I won't be gone long. 30 seconds. Don't go anywhere. In the meantime, hit the like button if you have not already. See, told you guys it wouldn't be long. Thanks for coming on in. If you're just coming on in, if you're new here, please subscribe to Bigfootmichiganrob on YouTube. The Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube. Hi, Mike Bothwell. How are you? Mike, you got no sound on your end. I don't know. You guys got sound? I'd hope to do that whole story with no sound. Ugh. I'd hate to redo the whole show. So yeah, so that was that one. Leave a comment on that. Let me know because thanks, Mike. I'm glad I'm good to go. So yeah, if you're new, please subscribe. Hit that thumbs up if you would. And so again, anyways, thank you so much, you guys. So I'm gonna go on. As I said, the title of this was about Dogman or werewolf. So I got 2 werewolf stories from people, and I'm gonna get on with those here. Thank you, Obese Tuna, for the super sticker. Super chats, super stickers. I appreciate them from you guys. Don't expect them, but I love you. Thank you for that. You can also become a BMR pirate. There's about 100 of you that are actual active members, so thank you in advance for that. And so I'm going to move on with some werewolf stories. 2 of them I got for you guys. So thanks for coming in. This one is a Dogman in Alabama. And I got this from a dude named Larry. This is about Larry and his friend Brody. Brody's a DNR guy, a naturalist guy. And this is something that, again, you guys, the very last, the 3rd story is not going to be Um, have a terrible ending. But I got to tell you, this one is almost as bad as the other one. I'm just saying to give you a fair warning. So here we go. Anyways, so he starts out this email, everybody, that hears all these. He first of all he starts by saying smells, scratching, and then loud thuds, thud, thud, heavy breathing, wolf-like fangs, claws. Then the guy wakes up. This guy's name is Larry. Then he wakes up. Wow, what a nightmare, he says to himself. He gets out of his bed. He goes down, puts on a fresh pot of coffee. He says, Rob, it's about 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And he realizes he gets up like a good hour before his alarm went off because that nightmare just woke him up. You guys know how it is when you have a nightmare. At least I know how I am. If I have a nightmare, I get up, and when I'm up, I don't go back to bed. He says the dream, the nightmare, it really spooked this guy. He laughs it off. He goes back to the front door, and he gets his paper. You guys remember the newspaper? This takes place in 1997. So anyway, he goes to his front door to retrieve his paper. And he opens his door. He smells something. Excuse me. He wakes up. He's going to his front door, and as he's walking there, he approaches his door, and he's thinking to himself that it was odd that during the dream, the senses and the smells he had, he now, as he's awake, walking toward his front door and opening the porch door, those same smells that he had in his dream kind of come to fruition, and they're growing stronger and stronger and stronger as he approaches the front of the house. And then as he finally gets to the door, you guys, and he opens his front door on the porch, laying on his front porch, everybody, was the dead carcass of a hog. He goes on to say that this hog was open from the belly, and it was missing all of its entrails. He says, oddly enough, there was no blood or no blood stains. There weren't any guts. There's no gore left. It was just on this porch, pretty much drained of all of its insides. Again, no blood. He said for the most part that his porch was almost completely dry. This thing was like dried out. He goes on to investigate around his porch and around his yard. And he says, hey, man, Rob, I found these muddied up tracks of what appeared to be a massive dog. He says he thought that the tracks were very suspicious. And he says that the prints were like 3 and 4 toes that he could make out. They extended from what appeared to be a canine foot pad. And there were a few scratch marks or claw marks on his wooden front porch. And he says, Rob, they were deeply ground out. They were deeply ground into the wood. He goes, so whatever this was, it was very heavy. And he says, oddly enough, to him, they were bipedal. It wasn't like a set of 4 tracks that typically a wolf would leave, right? He thought it was extremely odd. Then, of course, as he goes on to tell me further on, he says, yeah, I live in the state of Alabama, which had at this time, you guys, it had a population of red wolves that today are now protected as they were extracted in Alabama. He's going on to tell me in, I think, the 1920s. So thinking about a wolf, there's been no wolves in these parts for 77 years, 70 years at least. The few that are there it's very rare to come across them. So he's kind of mystified. And what really spooked him, though, besides the bipedal tracks, was this dead carcass of the hog. Somebody leave a comment. Are there even hogs in Alabama? I'm unfamiliar with that. I don't know. He even wondered why the smell was so bad. That bad smell, even though it was all dried up. The body of this hog remained a mystery to him. So he decides to get on the phone and he calls his friend Brody. Hi, Werewolf. Hi, Don Moore. If you're new, please subscribe if it's the first time here. So again, he calls his friend Brody. He was a DNR agent and asked him if he could come up over and help him out with his current situation. So this Larry's talking to his buddy Brody, and immediately after he explains his experience on his front porch, Brody, his buddy from the DNR department, immediately rushes over to his house. He goes on to say, Rob, my buddy Brody, he arrives over a little past 8 o'clock in the morning. And in fact, when Brody got to his buddy's house, he didn't even knock on the door. He was already out in the backyard and on the porch investigating about the property. So Larry sees his buddy Brody. He puts on, brings out some coffee. He greets him, and they're together talking. Brody even was taking pictures of all about the property. He walked out to the edge of the tree line because his house backs up to the woods. He's just looking all about doing a thorough investigation. Then he goes on to say that Brody got distracted by a phone call. I guess he called somebody earlier. Then finally, Brody sits down and starts talking to his friend Larry, right? Who's the owner of the house. So he says, hey, Larry, man, let's go inside the house. I got to tell you something. They have their second cup of coffee or whatever, and they start talking. Then Brody, when he starts talking to his friend Larry, he sensed that Brody was a little bit nervous. He's a little tepid. He was actually Brody, who's very good skillful at speaking. He could find that he was searching for words. He was stumbling about his words when he's trying to talk to his friend. And Larry says, Brody, man, what's up with you, man? We've been friends for 20 years. I've never seen you nervous speaking with me. What's going on? Let's get on with this. What's up, bro? Hi, PG. He says to his friend Brody, whatever it is, dude, it can't be that bad. Spit it out. Let's go. So Brody takes, I guess, another sip of coffee. He goes, Larry, you have a situation here. Larry then informs me that he lives in Tuskegee, Alabama. And Brody works as the DNR agent at the Tuskegee National Forest. And the Tuskegee National Forest also backs up to Larry's home in the distance. Brody goes on to explain to his friend what he thinks the situation is, and Larry says, my Lord, Rob, my head is now in a tailspin. Okay. And then Larry's like, are you joking? What's going on here? Brody says, this is not funny at all. He just told Larry to sit back and listen to what he said, because what he's about to tell this guy is very, very serious. Excuse me. So Brody asked his buddy Larry what Larry knew about cryptids. And then more specifically, if he ever heard anything about Dogman. Now, this is 1997. Dogman started circling. I mean, for all of us in the 80s, Dogman has existed well before then, but it became very popular, as most of you know, I think in a 86, 87 timeframe. And then, so Larry, of course, says back to his buddy Brody, no, I never heard of Dogman. Not at all. What is that? And he says a cryptid. He wasn't even sure what a cryptid is, this guy. And then Brody went on to explain, well, do you know about Bigfoot, right? And so, Larry says, yeah, I know about Bigfoot. He goes, well, that's kind of a classification. Bigfoot's a cryptid. This Dogman is a cryptid, so on and so forth. So Larry says, oh, wait a minute. So this is the work of a Bigfoot? Because he still is a little bit confused. Cryptids, Dogman, he's still confused. So Brody says, hey, listen, I'll explain everything to you. He goes on to tell Larry that he thinks that something that the creature that killed his hog, that left him on the front porch, was that of a Dogman. And he goes on to tell him some fashion it as that upright cryptid or creature. And other people suggest, as you all know, werewolf, right? He goes on to say it's not quite a dog, but it's not quite a wolf. But it's bipedal, walks on its hind legs, and it's been known to roam the forests of North America. So Larry's like, his head is spinning, you guys. He's like, what in the world? What are you telling me, man? He goes on to ask his friend Brody if he's in any danger, what's going on. And Brody says back, well, I'm not too sure if you're in danger or not. I really don't know. Brody himself, he even said to Larry, yeah, I know this sounds a little bit crazy. He even went on to say that the phenomenon of Dogman was something that he was just clued in by his boss in the DNR department, his supervisor. And in fact, it was just brought up to Brody about some alleged Dogman occurrences in that national park. And they went out and they started investigating this, the DNR department, okay? But they wanted to make sure that they kept their investigations totally under wraps in the Tuskegee National Park. The DNR was to keep this quiet. Do not let any of this, they're telling Brody now, his boss, do not let any of this slip out of your mouth. So now of course, Brody's telling his buddy Larry what he's not supposed to tell him, but he has to be honest with his friend and tells him, hey, you know what? I think you got this Dogman problem, or a Dogman left the hog for you on the porch. Brody goes on to tell Larry about some higher-ranking governmental officials had paid a visit to the office several months ago. Says as these officials entered the office to speak with the supervisor, they were made aware, and they sent them on this new project to look for this alleged creature. Their intentions was to find it, find evidence if they could, hunt it down, kill it, do whatever, and investigate. Okay. Thank you, Reverend Wild Bill, for the super sticker. Everybody participated in the chat, in the super chat. Thanks ever so much. I appreciate you guys. So, anyways, again, this was supposed to be held in the strictest of confidence. It was not to be made public. It was not to be spoken of. So Larry's sitting back. He goes, man, what a crazy mystery. He's even telling Brody it's kind of unbelievable. He knows he's just thinking this is some predatorial mammal, perhaps a wolf. And he just can't wrap his hands around what his friend Brody's telling him. He thinks it sounds ridiculous. And of course, I can see that, you guys. I mean, all of us in the chat room and all of us that follow, we are into these things and we believe in these things. But, I can't imagine myself going up to a person at Walmart or talking to him about Bigfoot or Dogman, right? They think we're crazy. We know that. We accept that, right? Brody reaches out to his friend and says, look, man, he puts his hands on his shoulder. He says, get your gear together, man. We're going to go out and look for this thing. If you're game, you and I will do a private investigation about your property and we'll go back into the forest. And so Larry's like, man, really? Go in the forest looking for this alleged creature you're talking to me about? He goes, yeah. So in fact, Brody even went to his vehicle and he got some documents out that he was not supposed to show the public. And he retrieved several pictures of the alleged Dogman. And Larry says he's opening this file and it says, DNR secret for your eyes only, something like that. I don't really know what the verbiage was. For your eyes only. And he's looking at these Dogman photos. He goes, Rob, sure enough, it was like, looked like some sort of werewolf, man. Massive head, rather large shaped eyes. And before I continue on, you guys know damn well the government has these photos. They know these things exist. They keep it under wraps. Why do they keep it under wraps? Because let's face it, they pose a danger. And no, not all pose a danger. Because I know Gary Spice Sr. in the house has never had a bad experience, but I'm just saying. So anyway, they go through these pictures, this, that, and the other. And he also had a cast. This guy Larry Brody has a cast of an alleged Dogman, which a Dogman print, I should say, that kind of matched the print that was in Brody's yard. So anyway, Larry's intrigued. Let's go do this. Let's go look for this thing. So okay, so Larry's got all this information. Brody giving him secretive knowledge about the alleged Dogmen. And they're together as a team, off the books, not telling the DNR. But I think Brody did call into his supervisor about the incident. And they're off. They get up early a few days later in the morning, and they set upon their journey looking for this Dogman type creature, werewolf, whatever you want to call it. And they went directly from his backyard and right through the forest. Larry says it's not going to be like a one-day hike. They brought a pop-up tent, food for a week, research equipment. I mean, Brody's providing all this equipment. Brody, in fact, took a vacation called his bosses and said, hey, I'm going to take a week vacation. And the vacation was planned to look for this Dogman on his buddy's property back in the woods of the National Forest. Throughout the email, he's telling me they got him some leisure time. They did a little bit of fishing, things like that, looking, exploring Mother Nature. So, but however, though, during their investigation, thank you, Keith, bro. Thank you so much, man. They started about their trip. They started about if they're furthering on their investigation. So the first 2 days, you guys, on this journey, they're looking for the Dogman. The first 2 days, they come up with nothing. It wasn't until right around the third day will they stumble upon some tracks. They're the same tracks that were on the porch. What he and Brody had put together, what Brody had casted. Now, Brody didn't cast tracks on the porch. You can't do that. He cast a track out in Larry's yard. I don't know if I made mention of that. So now Larry's kind of excited. Brody's kind of excited. They got a little bit of evidence. So they went back to their camp. They repositioned their location of their camp. They moved somewhere closer to the area where they found these tracks. And they sat around that night. Brody and Larry are sitting around the camp, and they were just not talking with each other. They're just listening and observing. Larry says, "Hey, Rob, it's around 3 o'clock in the morning when they heard this howl." Hi, football kid. Hi, Cannon Dummy. It was a very distinctive howl. It was not quite the howl of a dog or even a wolf, but it was like an echoing growl. Thank you, Cool Hand. Thank you so much, man. Thank you to everybody for the super chats. Love you guys. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Thanks to everybody for coming on in. Hit that like button. Very distinctive howl. Again, not a dog, not a wolf, but unusual. Larry goes on to say that the howl was almost like something made believe, like in a monster movie. So Brody and Larry, they decide it's time for bed. They put out the fire. They make sure that they're armed with their sidearms. They had sidearms and a shotgun, I believe it was. But now, instead of going to bed, they're tossing and turning, and they decide to go down and to the approximate location from the best of their knowledge of where these horrific howls were coming from. The howls were getting, louder and louder as they proceed, on this journey. They're getting frightened. The two men, they finally stop because they estimate that they're within about 100 yards of these strange vocalizations. Within that 100 yards, as they got closer, though, everybody, the howl stopped. And the forest grew eerily silent. Rob, it was so silent that they could hear the fluttering of their breath, especially from Brody, who appears to start panting, he says, almost hyperventilating. This is Brody now, the DNR guy. Brody calms down. He says, "Rob, we sat in silence for about an hour. The howls, hi, Walter, everybody else, the howls, they grew away. They decide now to go back to camp, get some rest, and start fresh in the morning." They're both back. They go to bed, whatever. They put a plan of action together to go back to camp the next morning. They fall asleep. Sun breaks in the morning. They get up. They go on this trail ahead of them as they start out again. And they see these same tracks. Now, these tracks, you guys, are a little bit closer to the new camp, and they were very fresh. They were three-toed, a wolf-like footpad, bipedal tracks. Again, you guys, much like at the house and much like they saw earlier. Brody pulls out a tape measure, and they measure to be 8 inches by 4 inches wide or something like that I recall. A match from the previous day's tracks. And the thing that scared these guys that these tracks are right on top of their campsite. When they get back to the campsite, because I don't know if I made mention when they left earlier, they left the camp, they went hiking, and then these tracks, they start seeing more and more tracks. Then they decide now to go back to camp. So they left their camp that morning when the sun rose. When these guys get back to their campsite that day, their entire campsite was ransacked, completely destroyed. The tent was slashed, although razors had slashed through it and cut it like a knife through butter. All of their gear, all their camping gear was strewn about the place. Food was tossed out. Their fishing poles were like smashed. As I said earlier, they did a little bit of fishing in between. And a lot of their gear turned up missing. They walked out several yards from the camp and they found more of their gear further into the woods, strewn about the woods. And again, they're watching these tracks. They picked up the same track line, bipedal, wolf-like impressions. Then all of a sudden, amazingly, out of nowhere, these tracks, they vanish, they stop, they're gone. Larry says almost like they disappeared. So Brody and Larry decide to head back to camp. Took pictures of whatever tracks that they seen, and they were picking up, collecting the rest of their gear that was dispersed in the forest. So later on, Brody decides that he tells his friend Larry that, hey, man, I want you to go out. I want you to relax here. There's some investigating I want to do by myself. And Larry's like, what do you mean, Brody? Go by yourself? And Larry says to Brody, hey, man, we've got enough. Aren't you a little bit scared? You know, we got these tracks, these weird howls. Our camp is shredded. I don't want to sit around. And he tells the guy, look, just wait here. There's something I want to investigate. Why don't you put together our camp and I'll come back? He says, okay. So Brody goes out. Larry stays back, situating the camp, what was left of the camp. He gets together whatever it was, starts packing it away while Brody goes out. Brody doesn't return for several hours now. Now, Larry, worried about his buddy, he goes into the forest looking for his friend. Then he finally comes upon, he says maybe after about 20 or 30 minutes, he finally comes upon Brody in the forest. He's about 30 feet away. He's propped up, kind of like sitting down against a tree. He yells out, "Oh, thank gosh, Brody! Good to see you, man. You're gone way too long. I mean, I didn't want to be by myself in a disheveled campsite." He got to Brody, and he sees some blood dripping down Brody's right hand, and his hand was firmly grasping his Bowie knife that he carried, and there's blood on it. This guy's terrified. He looks at his buddy Brody, and his throat was slit from ear to ear. Horrified, he does not know what to do. What's he supposed to do? He's frantic. He's disheveled. He goes back to the DNR. He goes, well, I'm not calling the police right now, although he was going to report it. But his first action was to go to the DNR where Brody worked and told him the whole story, and then took the DNR out to the location where Brody was. Brody's boss, the supervisor, asked Larry, what in fact did he tell you? What do you know? And Larry spilled his guts. The DNR supervisor of Brody told him, please do not repeat this to anybody. Please keep this under wraps. This is something Brody never should have told you about. But Larry's like, well, what happened? He didn't commit, the guy, it was his own blade to his own throat. He goes, certainly don't think it was this creature. Why would he do this to himself? That's what Larry's wondering. And he's talking to Brody's supervisor. To this day, he doesn't know what happened. He knows that there was reported man loses life in woods or whatever. They didn't say the circumstances behind the death. Larry, to this day, is mystified over what happened. He has no idea if this creature exists. He has no idea if his friend took his own life. He does not know any circumstance. He did tell me this in closing, that he has not gone back in the woods. He put his place up for sale, and he's petrified and has nightmares about his buddy, because I guess it was reported, as I mentioned earlier, some tragic loss of life in the woods. I don't know if the werewolf Dogman had anything to do with that. When this guy went alone, you guys, into the woods, did something overtake this guy? Because I made mention earlier in the story that all of a sudden Larry kind of became a little disheveled, right? His buddy became a little disheveled, and I don't know. I mean, we've all heard about stories about out in the woods. Sometimes we get overtaken by the phenomenon, paranormal, supernatural. Sometimes it's this phenomena. I'm gonna leave it at that. Causes us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. So I'm mystified at the end of that. I did not expect that at the end of that email. I did not expect such tragedy. I don't think you guys did either. Do I think it's a little sketchy at the end? Maybe I do, but again, people send me these things, and I don't change the narrative. I present them to you how I get them. I know one thing's for sure: these things are out there. Don't know that it was the cause of this. I don't know. That's for you guys to decide. Please leave a comment if you do. Please leave a comment on what your thoughts are on this. I can't really read the chat because I got one more for you guys, which I promise it's not tragic. It's about friendship, but it's also about a werewolf. I got to do one more thing. I got to take another quick 30 seconds before I get back because my mouth is just parched. Give me 30 seconds. Don't go nowhere in my absence, please. Once again, leave a like. Leave a like. Thanks. If you're new, please subscribe. BMR, I'll be back in about 35 seconds. Thanks to everybody for coming on in. See, that wasn't too long. That wasn't too long. I just can't sit forever. I got to stretch my legs a little, had a little drink of water. This third one is also from Alabama, and it's not as, you know, how shall I say it, you guys? It doesn't have quite that ending. It's actually kind of a scary story though. But it's also in the end, new friendships are made and something again takes place in Alabama, about some sort of cryptid creature. Thanks for coming in. And I'm going to get on with the last one. I appreciate all you guys. I really do. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Where am I? Which one is it here? I got. So anyway, this is pretty cool. This is about a truck driving. This one's in the book. Some of you might have heard this one. I don't know. If a lot of you are newer, so you probably haven't. This is a story in Alabama. It's about a husband and wife truck driving team. I don't know if you're out there, Andrew, truck driving guy. Their names are Becky and Josh. A lot of Joshes today. There's a Joshua in the last story, in the first story, and this guy's name's Josh and his wife's Becky. Again, they have a truck driving. They're truck drivers together. And what they would do, you guys, is I guess I'm not familiar with how truck driving operates, but they were a tandem, as I said, and they would always take turns driving 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. It was a hard schedule, and the husband and wives were always, it was always the husband by himself for 2 weeks. Then the wife, Becky, would be by herself for 2 weeks. They had a very difficult schedule, this, that, and the other, like they're telling me. And so they never saw each other. This couple really hardly ever saw each other, except for brief periods where they took some time off, or they would see each other in passing in the morning. Okay. But the odd thing about this story, this encounter that they're telling me about, is that it was almost odd because it seems like every time Becky was left alone while the husband was off, she would hear these strange sounds and all these strange howls coming from their property. That always gave anxiety for Becky. She's like, why in the world do I experience these things when my husband's gone? And Becky and the husband were already thinking about doing something different because of not seeing each other. And, she was just done with the truck driving business. She says, hey, honey, we need to make some changes when you finally get back. And this, that, and the other. Becky would always tell the husband about every time you're gone, I hear these weird sounds from the forest, howls, whatever, and she was frightened every time he went away. The husband, Josh, went on to assure Becky that nothing was wrong. And yes, finally, when he got back after this last travel, that they would start looking into a different career where they could be together and where she would be frightened at night when he was gone. They go on to tell me that their property that they lived on was about 2.5 acres in the woods in western Alabama, as he tells me. And they had a rather large single-level house with a beautifully wrapped porch. I guess it was a wraparound porch, okay? And from this porch, it covered like a 360-degree view of the wood line because there was woods that surrounded this property. And really, Becky went on to say this is really what they loved most about the house. Wherever you went, they had panoramic views. As I said, it was in the middle, and the tree line was like 200 yards from from the side of the house, on all sides of the house. And right in the back, there was a road about 100 yards up from the back of the house that led to the interstate. And again, as I said earlier, Becky went on redundant a little bit in the story. Every time that the husband was gone, boom, weird things would happen. Strange howls of the unfamiliar animals, she's saying. That one night, she would also hear the sounds of lumber being snapped in the distance, or the sounds of large trees falling to the ground. And this would always keep Becky up late at night. And she said, Rob, the interesting thing about this is there's no logging industry on her land, private land, and the closest logging company was many miles north. She went on to say that the surrounding state-owned lands and other private properties also really had no logging contractors in the area. Then as the story goes on, the encounter story goes on, Becky says she got really more terrified because she all of a sudden one night there was sounds of very heavy footfall walking outside of her home. And she even heard the footfall, everybody, on the roof of her house, which really petrified her. She says, Rob, the footfall was almost like that of an animal on four legs. But as she heard it walking about the top of the roof of the house, that it kind of became like two legs. That would be bipedal. So it would be bipedal walking, right? And she said it had the heaviness of like a very big person mulling around the top of the house on the rooftop. And this was going on for several days. So one night Becky had enough of this. It was like 2 or 3 days in a row, you guys, where she thinks something is on top of the roof of her house. So she's scared, as admitted as I'd be scared if I was her. So she decided to call in the state police one night. So a patrolman pulled up to Becky's house, and she went on to tell the officer about hearing footsteps or somebody walking outside of the property, on top of the property, and proceeding up on the roof. Becky went also on to tell this officer of all the strange howls in the distance. She went on to tell him about the falling of the timber. And not to be redundant, again, all this footfall. So the officer asks her how long has this been going on for, and she says it's been going on for quite a while, and even made mention that it always goes on after her husband leaves. So she thought that maybe she had a stalker, right? A person. So the officer, you guys, kind of blew off Becky and said it was probably just her imagination. It was probably anxiety. She was working herself up in a frantic state because her husband was gone. And so he leaves. Now, the officer, as Becky says, took down all the notes. I mean, he was listening. He wrote down and documented everything that she had said. And the officer also now starts to walks about the property. The officer comes back and tells Becky that tell Becky about his findings, his little investigation while he was out there. He tells Becky that he didn't find anything that warranted her to be alarmed. He looked around the perimeter of the home. He didn't find any tracks, no footprints, nothing. Now, he did not go on the roof because, as I just mentioned, she heard strange footfall on her roof. The trooper goes on to tell Becky that he would file a report And then he said, you know what I'll do for you? I'll have a squad car patrol the property. Now, of course, how you can patrol the property when she's like deep into the woods, the state, like I mentioned, the main highway is like 100 yards away. So I guess this officer just wanted to get out of there, but he tried to give her some sort of assurances, right, just to calm her nerves. And he said he would stay in the area to the end of his shift. So tries to put her at ease. He'll be around, send out a squad car once in a while. So he leaves. The night goes on. She drifts off to sleep. Early the next morning, around 10 o'clock in the morning, Becky's telling me that there's a knocking at Becky's front door. Kind of startled her early in the morning. Well, 10 o'clock, not that early. And it was the same trooper paying her a visit from the night before, standing on her porch. The trooper introduces himself as Dan and asks Becky if she had a moment to speak with him. She obliged him. Yeah, absolutely. Invites him in. The both of them sat in the kitchen. You know, she made a fresh pot of coffee, and they're sitting around. So Becky goes on as Trooper Dan, I guess. Why did you find anything? What's up with this visit? She asks, if maybe something was missed from the prior night, this, that, and the other. Trooper Dan goes on to tell her, no, there were no new developments from the prior night, but he did have some. Questions from the previous night's report. The trooper went on to talk about the strange howls, the heavy footfall, the falling of the timber, the tree snaps, the speculation of somebody walking on a roof. So now he's more engaged with her versus the prior night. So after about 10 minutes into this of talking back and forth, this guy, Dan, the trooper, state guy, he told Becky that when he was off duty, what he did on the side, everybody, this is kind of cool, I guess. This trooper, Dan, says, look, this is what I do on the side when I'm out working for the police or the troopers. He moonlighted as a Bigfoot investigator, and he found that her claims were very similar to his other investigations. And he went on to tell her that I did not want to bring up Bigfoot or any of these things that night as she was already shaken. But he did his due diligence. He filed the report, and then he had planned on visiting and having a more casual conversation. And again, he mentions he researches Bigfoot. So Becky, kind of says, what do you mean, Bigfoot? So the trooper nodded, yes, I think maybe you get something going on here. He says, I believe in Bigfoot and I do this, right? So Becky says, are you making fun of me? He goes, no, I'm really not kidding. He said he was very serious about what he was telling her. He was so serious enough, in fact, you guys, that he asked Becky if he could come back later in the evening and camp on her property for the weekend. So now Becky's thinking, I don't know, maybe this is a weirdo. I mean, I don't now she's getting, even though it's a state trooper, you guys, she's like feeling, oh no, my husband's not here. He wants to camp on my property. What's up with that? And let me tell you guys, if I'm away, I would not, I would not allow my wife. I mean, that's strange. It does sound strange to me. So a red flag goes up. This is, what's going on here? So Trooper Dan realizes by just looking at Becky that she was in serious doubt. He knew she was apprehensive. So Trooper Dan, tries to assure her that he was serious. And he even put Becky in touch at his trooper station on his actual radio. And she got on the radio with Dan and his captain. And the captain said, yes, Dan's side job, he is a Bigfoot investigator. This is off duty stuff. He can do what he wants, but I trust you. Trust me. Dan does this. He loves doing this. You have no harm, no fear. He's a straight shooter. So after several minutes of talking with Dan's captain, she agreed to have Trooper Dan come out and camp on her property over the weekend. Dan assured her that Dan thanked her and says, yeah, he'd be back later around 5 o'clock in the evening to set up his base camp. And again, her property is expansive. The wood line's like 100. The wood line in the back is like 100 yards away. On the side of the house, it's maybe 20 feet. So sizable property, this, that, and the other. So sure enough, not past a minute past 5 o'clock, Trooper Dan arrives at Becky's house. And he came fully prepared, you guys. He had his 1-man or 2-man pop-up tent. She goes on to tell me he had brought night vision binoculars with him, the FLIR heat sensing instrumentation equipment, sleeping bag. He brought a bundle of wood for a fire, tons of equipment. So Dan goes ahead and he sets up his base camp about 100 yards from the back of the house, within proximity of, the wood line. And even Dan, which I thought this was cool, was I was reading onto this, Dan even brought with him, excuse me, guys. He brought a set of 2-way transmitters so that 2 of them could communicate, right, from his little setup base camp 100 yards out to Becky in the house. So Dan's getting ready to go off to his little base camp. Again, he's well prepared, and Trooper Dan goes on to tell Becky what his plans were, what his investigation was going to be all about. So he even brought along some. Becky says he even brought some 3-inch diameter wood sticks that reminded her of small baseball bats that he told her he was going to use to stimulate possible Sasquatch wood knocks. He also said that during the night that he would be making a series of whoops. He would take those little bats and make wood knocks. So he told her to not be alarmed if you hear these things, especially if he starts howling, because she assured him that would be him, because he wanted to draw attention and see what traffic from these cryptids he could bring in, I guess, and so on and so forth. And so again, 2-way transmitters so they can stay in communication. Dan told Becky that she would be abreast of his every move and would radio in when he was to make some strange noises. So Becky, agrees. Okay, thank you. She's a little more comforted. And he goes, yeah, I understand your apprehension because we're dealing with something that most people are not familiar with, but I appreciate you letting me, camp out here, this, that, and the other. Becky, thanks for the help. And that's that. Becky even goes on to tell me that, yeah, she was kind of relieved that she wasn't by herself, knowing this man seemed legitimate on her property, this, that, and the other. So now Dan is back at his base camp. The sun's starting to set. He radioed into Becky that now he's to start his series of wood knocks. He's told Becky he would be running 3 at a time for every 20 minutes for the next hour. Becky goes, thanks for that, and blah, blah, blah. Let's move on. So Trooper Dan makes his first 3 wood knocks. And she says during this time was weird because she heard a lot of crickets, a lot of unusual noises that she normally would not hear too often. Crickets, all this stuff. So they're all blazing in the background. Chirping of birds. So she thought it was odd, despite living in the woods. She never really. Then she goes on to say that I never really realized it, but now she was more in tune to her surroundings, right? So I had to throw that in there because it means something. So upon completing the wood knocks, nothing really changes. The same sounds of the forest are are in the distance. 20 minutes goes by, and Dan again smacked his wood knocks for the second time, and nothing returned. He does it a third time. Again, nothing. But now this time, the forest grew silent. Couldn't hear anything. You could hear a pin drop. There was no, clattering of chipmunks or rodents. Everything just stopped. The forest went silent, you guys, for several hours. It's now approaching midnight. Dan now radioed into Becky that he now would be doing a series of howls and whoops and assured her to stay calm as it would be him. So now, in the quiet of the night, Dan lets out his calls. He did this twice. He did it all within an hour, and after an hour goes by, there's no response. There's no nothing. Now it's getting you guys close to 2 o'clock in the morning. Dan once again radios into Becky that he would do one more set of calls and then he would call it a night. He said he would start up later the next morning around 9 a.m. and he'd go back and conduct his investigation. Becky said, "Thank you. Good night." Dan makes his last set of calls, puts out his fire, and then he prepares to turn in. Just before he's going to bed after this last series of whoops and hoops and hollers, a return howl roared back. Finally, we're getting somewhere, right? However, you guys, the howl that was returned did not come from his direction in the wood line, but it came directly from the back of Becky's house. Around the perimeter of Becky's house, he could hear backward toward the house. Dan radios into Becky to stay put and stay quiet, and he quickly was going to make his way back to Becky's house, right? So as Dan is making his trek in toward Becky's house, he's about 50 yards out. And Dan sees, he stops, he looks, he's looking at the house. It was kind of lit from the moonlight. And he saw a large, massive image on, guess what? The roof of Becky's house. Now, for those of you that remember the story, she heard things on top of her roof as well, on top of the house. Now, Becky starts back on the radio and exclaim, "I think something's on the roof." And Dan says, "I know, I can see something, but he can't quite make out what it is." So he pulls out his night vision binoculars and he looks towards the roof. And he sees some humanoid of some sort standing on two legs. He doesn't think it's a Bigfoot either, but he's not sure what this is. But it's standing on top of a roof. And it's walking from end to end on Becky's roof. So Dan, through the night vision, as he's still advancing toward the house, is watching the movement and this creature, whatever it is, going side to side. Then he sees this thing. Then he's following it. And then he sees what appears to be this creature jumping off the roof, and it heads towards the wood line. Dan still has the ability to focus, to keep in with his night vision on this creature, and he now sees it that it was bipedal, but then he now sees it go stand upright and advance into the woods. So now it stands up, runs into the woods. Dan reaches the house and Becky's like screaming, "Did you see it? Did you see, what is it? There's something there, wasn't there? I'm not nuts. I'm not going crazy, right?" And Dan goes, "Yeah, he saw something." And then he tells her, "I can't make out what it was. I know it wasn't a man, and I'm not so sure it was a Bigfoot." He goes on to say, "I think it looked more like a wolf of some sort." So Becky now comes out of the house with Dan, and Dan goes over to the side of the house where they seen this creature jump off. Because Dan is thinking that, man, there had to be, this is a heavy creature. There should have been some impression left along the house. So he's now looking for evidence of a footprints or whatever. He picks up a set of tracks. He goes on to tell Becky that this was not a Bigfoot. They were not human feet. They were more animal-like feet, more like that of an oversized wolf. And right before he got to the tree line, they disappeared. The husband comes home 2 weeks later. They get together. So now the husband finally gets with Becky. She invites Trooper Dan over and they discuss the night's happenings. And so the husband now takes a leave from absence from work, as does Becky. Trooper Dan on the weekends was still coming to the house to further investigate all of this. And I guess the investigations went on for several months into the fall, I guess it was, you're telling me. And no further evidence, no further visits on the roof outside of the property. And on a little follow-up, Becky and Dan both now live. They both got different a different career where they're both together now. And she says, "Rob, it's kind of odd that ever since that encounter, nothing has turned up. They've remained friends with Trooper Dan because he always checks in with them. But then she poses me the question, Rob, how is it that every time my husband's away, I would experience these things, yet when we both change careers and we're together all the time, why it doesn't pay me a visit?" She thought that maybe it was just after her. Whatever answer I gave back, I don't recall, you guys, but I really don't have a good answer. I mean, I'm not an expert, obviously, but I did find it strange that she only had these experiences when she was alone. Yet the husband never experienced anything when he was alone. I got to thank everybody for coming on in. I hope you enjoyed those encounter stories. I enjoy doing this, you guys. I really do. I enjoy the things that I get and present them to you guys. I hope you did like it. You guys seem to like them, I mean, by the responses from the other ones that I've done. I love doing this. Don't forget that if you're new here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, Texas Front Porch, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast. Donnie Cho says stuff. Paranormal Paul, Monica Rollins, Our Paranormal World. Hit a like on the way out. I do want to thank you really briefly what we got going on here. Kelly Sandiford, Obese Tuna, the Reverend Wild Bill, Keith, and Cool Hand for your awesome super chats. You guys rock and roll. You all rock and roll. Every single one of you. Without you guys, I wouldn't have a show. Thanks to the people also listening that don't come into chat. Hey, I like doing this. Like nice little turnout tonight. 90 plus people in the chat room. That's quite. I'm quite humbled by you guys. I am. I'm on Tuesday nights at 9 with Krista, Thursday afternoons with Tex at 1, and Saturday night at 11. Me and the girls, we do late night, the BMR Show, which is kind of fun, a little more lighthearted than during the week. Something fun we all like to do. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning on in. On your way out, if you have not already, hit the like button. That does, of course, help, promote the show and get the analytics flowing for YouTube. Again, I appreciate you guys. Love y'all. With that being said, it's Friday. I'll see you Saturday at 11. Oh, by the way, tonight, Blondes and Booze are going to be on at in about a half hour. They got a cool show. Go check out Krista and Brandy. I'm BMR. Until next time, love, peace. Talk at you.
This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.